welcome to all of you. We were kind of, taken around in a wondrous caper all around the venue to come back here. So sorry, we're starting like maybe 2 minutes late. Sarnath, probably doesn't need introduction to you guys here because you must have read some of his earlier works and seen it. I'd like to ask Sarnath a little bit about the, he continues the story of Brigu, right? Sarnath has created a kind of alter ego, Brigu. So the first graphic novel of Sarnath's, Corridor, which is set in Delhi. It has Brigu walking in Connaught Place, and walking is actually a theme that begins actually in his very first novel. And then the second one, Barn Owl's Wondrous Capers, is set in Calcutta. And he brings, in both these the first graphic novels, what Sarnath does is also it's also the story of the city. It's not just the story of Brigu and Brigu's relationship with the city, but the city itself as a character. And here, Sarnath, you have three places, right? You have Delhi, Berlin, and Karachi. It's also a novel, this one is through the relationship between Brigu and Mahrukh. This also kind of becomes a story of the fraught relationship between India and Pakistan. Brigu is Indian, and Mahrukh is from Pakistan, from Karachi. So what we see in this novel, actually, in a way, there is a continuity from, there's a continuity of both the autobiographical or the all false autobiographical, so the faux autobiographical on the one hand, and also there is the continuity of the story of cities. Yeah, so I'd like to speak a bit about, I would like you to speak a bit about two things. One is walking. So Brigu is bechen, he's restless. He has to keep walking. He cannot sit still, and he just has to walk. And Brigu was walking already in the corridor, through the corridors of the colonial arches and the corridors of Connaught Place. So there is also a counter modernity that you propose through the architecture, through the relationship of this authorial self with cities. Especially this becomes even more apparent here with Berlin. But I would like you to actually speak a bit about walking and how you mobilize walking. Sarnath has a bad cough, so he's going to be coughing through it.
Thank you, Sabi, for a lovely introduction. Thank you, all of you, to come so early. I mean, this is roughly when I have my first tea and I start waking up. So excuse me, it'll take me a little while. We'll wake up slowly. Walking, this book reveals, all the books reveal a time when, we were all, it always felt like the parties elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like you were grounded in a city where the circus has already left town. And I'm talking about Delhi in the 90s, in the 200s. And Delhi was subdivided between the Seths and the Mathurs and the Malhotras and the Dalhotras we were like a upstairs, downstairs city. So for most of us migrant people, Delhi would come to an end like Kinshasa, or like in a kind of an African town. Delhi would go to, have a drink and go to sleep. There's a serial called Mungeri Lal. All you see at night is like bicyclists roving up and down the city of Delhi. And whilst you could also hear parties going on in different parts, it's just that those parties you were not invited to. Now, this was roughly the time when many people you didn't know that many people, and you did not really, your time was not taken by like so-called like the legit parties or legit places. You had a lot of time to yourself, and what you did was you explored the city. You walked the length and breadth of the city, almost like you're looking for clues of a crime that was never committed. You're just aimlessly walking about, picking up clues, and that left you with a strange sense of peace. Because in the book also it says that when you walk, you remember things badly, and somewhere down the line, I feel that I have understood the psychic health of a city by just walking through them, whether it's Karachi, whether it's Tokyo, whether it's Berlin. eh, it's a very internal time, and but walking, as we know, is also class based, and in terms and also religion based. So, for example, I'm a night walker. So sometimes I would walk at night. Like in Pune, we always stopped and asked for ID. If you are part of a certain community, if you're part of a certain class, walking is not as easy. Or gender, of course. In Delhi, for example, this information is completely irrelevant to someone like a woman in walking in Delhi does not happen. I walk at night for miles and miles with something that is not possible um, for
So that you also evoke in reference to your peripatetic protagonist. There you also refer to peripatetic philosophers like Kierkegaard, right? So there is a reference to Soren Kierkegaard and walking, and how walking aids in thinking and memory, and so peripatetic philosophy is actually, I feel, central to your book in multiple ways. You also refer to Coleridge and the restlessness of the restlessness leading to a creative engagement with the space around. It's interesting to think of the dimensions of walking. I mean, as you mentioned, there is very much, of course, also the class element there, and which, as you just mentioned, plugs back into the tiered, in terms of class. Delhi is a very tiered city, right? The Mathurs and the Malhotras in their bungalows on the one hand, and Brigu walking the streets, the migrant Brigu walking the streets restlessly on the other. So there is, I do see a contrast here in terms of a certain kind of restfulness and ease that that upper tier, uh, which is almost kind of untouchable upper tier, even though there are those moments of interaction, but those are fleeting, right? So the peripatetic actually becomes a very important trope in that sense. I think this. It's also mobility, right? It's
yeah. Well, you met the other lot. There were places, the City Fort Auditorium, at music festivals, at Nehru Park. There were, and college, of course. You interacted with the sort of settled, the Suits and the Dubes and whatever. But largely for you, New Year, even, but it was a different time. So what the book tries to hold is a emotional history of a particular period time. Now, even like academics are working on history of feelings, and I think comics, because of its image and text and the combination of pictotextual, it can evoke a certain time and how it felt at that certain time.
You create your own map as well, so it's not just time.
Yeah, a kind
You
of a
also create
psychic.
a space.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It is I am a writer of space fundamentally, and and this class based walking, like, maybe it's prevalent everywhere. Like in America, if you are a black person, you walk differently. In Germany, if you're a migrant person, you walk differently in different neighborhoods. So the sort of the walking is a kind of a class based aspect, and but this is a time. I mean, sometimes it's very hard for us to remember what a top-it afternoon looked like, where your entire life was built around that Friday night, Doordarshan is going to watch a show on television. A lot of people say that your book is about nostalgia. No, I don't want that world back. But just that I want to record that world because it's sort of shaped, where, one film, Do or Do Paanch, happening on Sunday would make you expectant for make you like go for the rest the whole week because there's going to be this one. Then everybody had to wait at home for a call to come. I remember. Do you remember that time?
Yeah,
You're far too young for that. Like everybody was like waiting. I have a call coming on Sunday. Even Kapil Dev, I suspect, sat at home on a Sunday autumn afternoon
waiting for the telephone to ring.
telephone call that is going to change
Yeah.
your life, and all that call never came. But through this book, I had tried to kind of depict how we felt at a particular time, and that's how.
Yeah, this kind of psychogeography in some sense, right? I mean, there's the mapping that you do of these three places here, the Delhi, Berlin, and Karachi. There is a kind of psychogeography in some sense of these places, right? It comes through in the frames in your. I just want to quickly just show, open this book out and give you a sense of what it looks like. It's very cinematic. Sarnath's drawing is very cinematic. It's frame by frame. It's not exactly 24 frames per second, but it almost is. It's very cinematic. There are these tight close-ups, and you pull out and you see the city from an eagle's eye sort of perspective. And there are also these close-ups of the faces of characters.
I can hold the mic.
Right?
Sure.
No, yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
I'll hold.
So there are, thanks. So there are, I just wanted to show you actually, so there are these moments when the camera of the graphic novelist's pen takes you to spaces that you otherwise will not notice. This is a corner in which somebody is holding there is a balloon seller. He's holding a bunch of balloons in his hand and standing in a corner, possibly under a bridge or something. So it takes you to spaces which are also secretive spaces, intimate spaces, other spaces, other worlds. It unsettles as much as actually Brigu, the protagonist, is unsettled. There is kind of what you're doing here also is to unsettle the reader, to unsettle the. I don't know if when it comes to a graphic novel, I'm always confused whether to mention it as reading or seeing what we do with a graphic novel. Are we looking at a graphic novel? Are we reading it? We are doing both. So in the seeing part of it, there is that cinematic thing. You take us to spaces that otherwise go unnoticed, that are otherwise missed. And what you also do, Sarnath, is that this is this is very much from the perspective of the walker, right? I mean, the entire thing is actually from the perspective of the walker. So you're mapping it through walking, right? And you're creating alternative maps. You're taking us to, as I said, you're taking us to spaces that we otherwise don't go to. And here comes a very important trope, which I would like you to speak a bit about. There is, it has a chapter title called Migrant. Yeah, right at the beginning. So, and you see the last migrant. This is very important for all of you to see because do you recognize this? The cheetah. This is the cheetah that was brought to India this was the failed attempt to sort of repopulate the Indian forest with the cheetah. And the cheetah is actually kind of brought to India to Kuno National Park. And how many of them survive now? I don't know. I think 17 of them were brought here. Yeah. And 5 or 6 of them died.
Yeah.
We don't know the story of the rest of them yet.
Most of them died, yeah.
So the cheetah actually becomes a sort of metaphor for the migrant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cheetah is uprooted from Africa, brought to India. Doesn't really do well here, doesn't thrive at all. So the cheetah becomes then very much also, the cheetah is Brigu as well, right?
Yes.
Or all migrants for that matter.
Yes.
And I see here also the cheetah as the outsider in Berlin, right? I mean, the one who does not quite belong. So maybe the Palestinian in Berlin, or we do have Maruk here,
Yeah.
whom Brigu falls in love with and ends up marrying, and also ends up divorcing at some point. So there is, that fraught relationship of the migrants' intimate and fraught and divisive relationship with space. Um, I would like you to actually speak a bit about being a migrant in Berlin in the context also of the migrant, because you're a migrant here. In Delhi, Brigu is a migrant. Brigu slash Sarnath is migrant in Delhi. And then Brigu moves to Berlin, where he's like doubly a migrant. And the cheetah, of course, doesn't do well at all when uprooted. So how does Brigu do when uprooted?
Well, in the book, the migration is what happened was the characters who were living in Indo-Pak couple who was living in Delhi at that point of time, and there was great optimism between the two countries, India and Pakistan, and Nawaz Sharif and Vajpayee
This
were
is
in power.
when the Samjhota Express, the train
That's right.
starts and the bus.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And then there was a general sort of there was a peace there was a period of peace that kind of descended upon us, and there were buses between the countries, and there was like just lots of things happening. Roughly that is the time when the characters were like living in Delhi. And there were all these campaigns called Aman Ka Asha, if you remember. It was the Times of India campaign. But then suddenly, like a few wars or some skirmishes started making the relationship started getting fraught, and soon it kind of reached absolute low. Somebody joked that Aman left for Australia and Asha is waiting for her paper in Canada. Aman Kasha was finished. So what these characters who had been until now navigating through the Ministry of Home Affairs, literally sitting there in the offices like still lives for most of the life, they realized that that was what kept their marriage together. All that fighting against the system. Then finally, they couldn't fight the system anymore, and they moved to Berlin, where the fight that was with the government in Jaisalmer House became the fight between themselves. So suddenly, the relationship became internal. So the war was outside, and Berlin brought the war inside, and the characters split up.
So the Indian Pakistani couple here, Brigu and Mahrukh, who meet actually in Delhi first. So Mahrukh, I would like you to actually tell us a little bit about Mahrukh's experience of migrancy, because she's in Delhi from Karachi, in a very at that point, as Sarnath just mentioned, this is that brief few years, 6 or 7 years, when we were lulled into a sense of security and peace and friendship between the two countries, etc. And then it gets broken again. But Mahrukh, so Mahrukh is actually kind of really displaced, right? I mean, she's from Karachi, she's in India. In India, she's forever waiting for visa approvals and things like that. And there's the entire nightmare of the bureaucracy that the migrant undergoes, which Mahrukh does as well. So she does in Delhi, and she, of course, also does encounter bureaucracy in Karachi, as well as we don't deal so much with Karachi's bureaucracy, but Delhi's bureaucracy is absolutely, it's like it takes up entire pages of which I thought was very interesting, because it's very riveting. This whole, it's not a boring account of bureaucracy, but it's absolutely riveting, because it's also very relatable. You're like, waiting in corridors forever, and there's some peon kind of takes pity on you and, brings you water or whatever, and, tries to move things along a little bit better. So there is also Brigu's and Mahrukh's relationship with the city, the capital city of Delhi, which is a city of bureaucracy.
These days, people talk a lot about slow life, slow living, patience, and stuff like that. I mean, these Indian bureaucracy teaches you a lot. It's almost like a spiritual experience of mindfulness, of like sort of, it kind of makes you. Because when your relationship is based on bilateral relationship, like a country like India and Pakistan, you are screwed for the rest of your life. It's almost like a autoimmune disease to have married a Pakistani, because it continues even after the marriage. I mean, I would even go TED Talks about why not to marry a Pakistani, because it kind of just continues for the rest of your life, like an autoimmune disease. But
it's a condition.
It is a condition. But we Indians, we are masochistic people. We like being kind of, we kind of try to kind of think of the best out of the situation. I read Dostoevsky first time while waiting for the corridors. The lower level of officials were so still that you could do still life on them. Actually, there were more life in the water cooler than the people who walked in those world. Sort of making that uncanny thing that living people are not quite as living as you think they are, and dead things are not quite as dead.
Yeah, so you do have the objects in the bureaucratic
Yeah.
offices. There's a whole page of you just have these objects thrown at you one after the other. The water cooler, the printer, the fax
Yeah.
machine.
Yeah.
These actually become character. They
become
do acquire a
characters,
life of their own.
Yeah. And there's a definite joy in drawing that particular world, because somebody I met at Jaipur Lit Fest was who had like figured out a comic book company where they are using illustrators, they're using books that are available publicly, and they are using AI to produce books after books after books. So I asked her why. I mean, because the person asked me that, what next? For me, like writing a book is like being in a bathtub. I have to be forced out of it. You get like, you sort of sit there because this book is like largely you write your books mostly for yourself to kind of, get through life or get by. And then there are fellow pilgrims, other people like that book and they read it, and that's great. But much of it it's a project of reclamation. You're reclaiming memories that are fondly remembered but barely recollected.
Right.
Like some vague thing that may or may not
It's
happen.
also like that fading soundtrack of Hindi film songs that you refer to here, for example, right? And
Yeah.
there's a soundtrack as well. This book is like multimedia. It's
Yeah.
and it really you can really hear the songs in the background. You can hear the sounds of the typewriter or whatever.
Yeah.
So
But we have to visualize sound. And comics
Yeah.
does not have sound of
Yeah.
its own
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
film. You were mentioning film a few times, so it might be interesting to kind of. Comics and films are two different medium, because what happens with films is that you as a filmmaker, the filmmaker decides how long you want me to watch the film
20,
through. So the duration is decided. It's a durational medium decided by the filmmaker. She decides how long people are going to, which means that it is your judgment. How long does it take
Yeah,
for
whereas
people to
here you can
comprehend?
stay with the frame for as long
You
as
can
you want.
stay with the frame for a much longer time, depending on, you can like speed read it once.
Yeah.
That's how people read comics. They just speed read through the narrative. And then they realize that, well, the narrative is like not like anything significant. And then they go back and go for a slower reading where everything is frozen in time, so you can go back and forth.
Right.
And we also have to create the atmosphere. Comics is a tonal experience. It's compositional. Like, yeah, like Sachi would know. It's like a poem, writing a poem. It either feels good, largely it has, you also, yeah. So it either feels good or it doesn't feel good. I mean, no matter how much logic you use, it might not work. So composition is also like, Ravinder Jain. Sorry, I took Ravinder Jain. I don't know why his name popped up. He would like have his harmonium. He would play a few notes, then he would write, and the writing would look shit, but the notes would look nice.
Right.
Sometimes you'd write it and the note would not look nice. But composition is that when it just somehow happens inside your head, there's no logical way to kind of write a good comics. It's basically just a tonal universe. You need
Right.
to get tonally involved. Just like writing poetry, I would, or any compositional art.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's both, but there is, of course, it's not as if there is no premeditation to this, right? It's
You expand on a theme.
exactly.
So you expand on the theme of Jaisalmer House, and which is the Ministry of Home Affairs in Delhi, which is for us was
where you spend a lot of time in this
Yeah.
book, by the way. You spend a lot
Yeah.
of time in Jaisalmer House, in its corridors and cobwebs and
yeah. But you can also make it into a fantasy place. I thought I met like Khizar Shah, as in like the Jhulelal, the Sindhi mystic who would travel on a fish and would appear in a green clothes whenever there's a water body, and all this is happening. All these fantasies happening
Yeah.
in that corridors of Jaisalmer House, or in Karachi, the jinns are fighting
jinns,
against each other.
yeah.
As you know, Karachi was a big. There was like lots of Pathans were fighting the Mohajirs. The Mohajirs were fighting the Sindhis. And there's a place called Liari, which currently is in fashion right now because people are talking about it. But I had spent a lot of time in Liari, walking up and down Liari and sort of seeing the julus, the Muharram julus going through Liari. And the taziyas are like, from UP originally. And Lucknow, UP, like Lucknow, there was a poet, Hindi poet called Kailash Vajpayee, who said, "Wahan pe wahan jaisa kuch nahi tha." There was nothing like that there. And you might not, I always think that Lucknow might not have the same Lucknow properties which you might find in Karachi.
Right.
The same humor and stuff like that. And you go to Liari and you'll find that sort of stuff. And only by walking, only by giving time, not by researching, not by like walking here, say, like there's a boat-shaped mosque in the middle of Liari. There are African football team, Makrani, so they're called Siddhis in India. Makrani football teams in Liari.
Yeah.
They're Balochis. It's like a joyous fest of living in South India, South Asia. And this big appetite to food, because I have a big appetite for these things. And the only way of doing that is by walking and drawing. Walking takes you there, drawing slows you down and makes you become that place. Because when you draw, it's like when you are drawing the boat-shaped mosque in Liari, it becomes your mosque. When I draw the same mosque, it becomes my mosque because drawing is an autobiographical relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also
sorry.
spectral. I mean, what
Got excited suddenly. Not good for me.
Water.
There's a medical team around.
There's also what the book is also inhabited by ghosts.
Which means I'm waking up.
Okay, good. Glad to know you're waking up, but drink some more water.
Yeah.
So you know what the book does also is to show us a lot of ghosts, jinns, right? I mean, it's inhabited by jinns. I mean, there's like frames after frames of jinns. Yeah.
I'll hold that.
These are and the jinns could be.
So this is Inspector Ali. Yeah, if you show that.
Here.
Yeah.
Right.
So these are jinns.
The jinns.
Yeah. Well, jinns also jinns are mixed with architecture.
Yeah.
And when partition happened, some of the jinns stayed in Delhi, some went to Lahore, some stayed in Lahore. So that jinn, there's always mediation that has to happen in jinns. In Firozshah Kotla, you can put an arzi in Xerox copies to the jinn to sort out your problem. So this is Inspector Ali.
Who has ears like a jinn, actually, right? So
He's part of the Karachi police, who's the jinn section of Karachi police. And he's helped by someone called Sumo Jinn, who is this person lounging next to him here. Sumo Jinn is created from the, basically, Inspector Ali realized that to handle a jinn, you need another jinn. From how we learned from the colonial masters, that in order to quieten down that native.
Interpreter.
Yeah. So there is Suella Braverman also in this story, that in order to kind of handle a native, you need another native to make them the
interpreter.
We call the capo.
Yeah.
So you need a capo to kind of take care of the other natives, because that capo is going to do their work much better. So I don't know about your experience about like airports. My most terrible encounters in airport has been at Heathrow.
Absolutely.
By people who look like me.
Oh my God, it's the worst. Yeah.
By people who look like me. Which is why this migrant game is quite interesting. The fresh migrants versus the older migrants. I call it Spora and the diaspora. There's always padda between the two of them.
Yeah, and also this idea of closing the gate behind you, sort of thing. The older migrant has been there for ages, and now they don't want. They don't want any more new migrants to come in, right? So which is how Brexit happened. And,
exactly.
And a lot of South Asians actually supported Brexit. So, it's very weird.
We are having the same problem in Germany also.
Yeah.
The right wing, the far right wing parties, of course, they have their own white supremacist also, but it is also very much bolstered by a lot of older migrant people who had come before. And I suspect the next level of support will come from Indians, because Indians are naturally racist, and it'll be nice to see the new .com, these new IT people who are coming to Berlin right now are going to probably change the system, and probably also move more towards the right-wing politics, because we are naturally right-wing.
What we don't see here, Sarnath, it's Mahruk's experience of Berlin as a Muslim person, right? So there is the there's a lot of stuff unsaid here. There are spectral ideas, there are spectral presences. So I mean, there are like Lucknow, like Lucknow in
वहाँ जैसा कुछ नहीं
हाँ.
था.
Matlab, there's this in the background. There is stuff going on. You know that it's there, but it's not quite spelt out, right? So can you just fill in a bit on Mahrukh?
Just to finish the Jinn part. So the Jinn story is a parallel story.
Yeah.
Remember the Mahrukh part. Ask me again. The Jinn part is the father's frustrated attempt of trying to create local perspective for the child back in Karachi, back in Calcutta. So even the beginning of the cover of the book is to kind of recreate all the particular eccentric relatives, the fairs, the street food, to create that sort of understanding for the child. But the child, meanwhile, is a Berlin child.
Yeah.
He has his own world and stuff like this.
But the child is also told the stories of the jinns, right?
To remind them of this one eccentric uncle who disappeared at the night.
So Jafar, by the way, is the child of Brigu and Mahrukh. So Jafar is both Indian and Pakistani and a Berliner. So in Jafar, actually, you see in some sense actually these tensions actually moving away. Jafar is more sorted, basically, certainly than Brigu, and he's also more comfortable inhabiting new spaces. He's
also
not unsettled.
Teaching the parents how to live rather than don't stay back in your own privileges of Delhi, where Dr. Singh, like a late floating, it was like Edo period, floating generation, where anything could happen in Delhi. I still feel like that, but the character also, the central character of the book also feels like that, but the son does not feel like that. So brings in objectivity. So that's the question. Your second question about being Muslim in Berlin, quickly touching it. So I live in the largest Palestinian area outside, I think in Europe, I suppose, Palestinian neighborhood. So everything is Palestinian and it's very regularized, and my child wears a keffiyeh. So despite whatever is happening in Berlin or in Germany, there are pockets of strong resistance by migrants, by Germans, many Germans, by Jewish people, which is kind of going against also the government and the state. So the level of fight.
There have been multiple.
People are fighting on the streets. People are fighting on the streets, getting beaten up. All that is happening. It is different from India, where it's silence. Like silence to the point that when there was a little protest gathering that happened in Aeroplace in India.
No, in India,
the shopkeepers.
What's happening?
The cops did not come. The shopkeepers came.
Yeah.
Indian people came and they stopped the julus. The cops don't even have to do anything.
Right.
So one has to see the complications. Whilst Germany is in a very strange historical situation right now, and nobody disagrees with that, of constantly making this sort of strange decisions. But the street level politics is pretty high level politics, and to the point that a Muslim child growing up in Berlin might be in a better position than a Muslim child growing up in Delhi, where you won't even find a house to rent. So these are complications of our current life that we have to deal with. And regarding Mahrukh, she is there throughout, but she doesn't have a voice. If you've noticed, very little. She kind of has very little, because I still am not mature enough as a writer, I feel, to kind of write the voice of a Pakistani Muslim woman. That imagination, I think the maleness in me is scared of trying to put words into, because I've seen too many male writers trying to write women writers because they have to, because it is the modern thing to do.
But that's what imagination does. So
many people have told me that, but you are a writer and you are you have to use your imagination. But I'm a writer, I'm a Bengali Brahmin, a privileged Delhi person writing the story of a Shia Muslim. Will be affected. So she's present throughout the book, and she is an active agent. But I haven't put words in her mouth because I kept it for the imagination of the reader to kind of put it inside.
Right.
It's my limitation also. But in a sense, I think that's also politically, I feel like better to not do it.
But we do see Mahrukh's world very closely in Karachi, right? So it's not as if, it's not as if you you don't touch upon it at all. I mean,
No,
you
no.
do.
Her whole world in Karachi, her world in
Also
Chicago.
in London, and during the marriage,
There's the wedding of the Maulana Rouge, the conversion.
Yeah.
There's a scene of conversion by Maulana with a red beard, and he was called Maulana Rouge. And then there's also the world in Chicago. So the book seamlessly, comics gives you the advantage of seamlessly moving around various different geographies.
Yeah. She her presence is actually more close. It's more in relation with space, right? So it's Chicago, London, Karachi. So it's more place than a sort of it's
Possibly.
than an interior world is what I'm
Possibly,
trying to say, right?
possibly.
So yeah.
Yeah, interiority is a tough thing to write. It's always good to kind of allude to an interiority if you can't write it, because there are great writers who can get into the interior spaces. There are people who do it. If you can't do it, don't try to act smart. Don't want Best is not to be an over smart person and try to imagine that. Write enough about the space and the time, I would suggest, space and that period, so that the person will themselves make those strange
But
connections.
very very strangely, you do make a big deal of in these there are a couple of frames where you see a close up of J.M. Kudzia's Life and Times of Michael K. Next to it is a to-do list. Well, actually, it's not a to-do list so much as a grocery list, right? So now the Life and Times of Michael K. It's also interesting that he refers to Kudzia. Dilip may have something to say about that.
Yeah.
So this, the Kudzia again, is somebody who doesn't belong. He feels so. There's the sense of unbelonging is so strong for the white South African writer that of course he moves to Australia, and he's really he's criticized for it. But it's also some there's that unsettling of even someone who's actually born and brought up in South Africa, very much a South African, but then feels unsettled enough to actually uproot himself, right? I mean, he's a kind of self-chosen exile. He's not been exiled, but self-chosen exile. So that's it's interesting that you frame this in a way around Kudzia, and also particularly this book, Life and Times of Michael K., which is also so much about the quotidian and the interiority of the character of Michael K., right? So through the quotidian, actually, you bring in, the struggle of the migrant, the belonging, whether the migrant belongs or not, even through lists of objects, items. What does the migrant buy in the grocery shop? This brought, right? This German bread, this cheese, this and but along with it, of course, are also things of the that you've left behind.
Yeah.
So it's a mixed list of objects that you find in a Berlin grocery shop and things that you find in a supermarket in Delhi, let's say, right? So
I've
through
grown
that
up with
list
a lot.
itself, there is a kind of
Yeah.
hybrid migrant thing there.
I've grown up with a lot of lies about migration. Migrants go somewhere to wherever, Nebraska, Ohio, and then come back with a whole set of mythology about like what it is like to be a migrant. In America, everybody is bright and honest and smart and clever, and keep your wallet, and you go like 5 years later, the wallet is exactly in the same position, and you like grow up with it. You realize over the years, and same happened in Punjab, I guess, when people go and like, Tiger Joginder Singh from Patiala goes to Canada and becomes Toyota Joginder because they get a Toyota dealership, and then they have kids live in haciendas and stuff like that. So migration is a lot of myth making to also support your own migration. That I went and I did it for a good reason, but there are all sort of complicated, or you have like very tough stories about like being migrant. There's something other than these micro collision of just being, when specificities collide, when two modernities collide, it creates an interesting world, and people need to like write these interesting worlds in a much more like a normal way, without like like without like any like.
Yeah, without being into a sort of myth, sort of.
We
But
have 15 minutes, so
yeah,
if you
we'll
want, we
take
can,
questions in a bit. But I have one last point, last thing I would like to speak a bit about, which is the spectrality of various things. I mean, the jinn becomes in something, like the cheetah. the cheetah and the jinn, actually both of these become really tropes around which the identity of the migrant is built around these two. The jinn is myth, the jinn is memory, the jinn is lore, the jinn is stories leaping out of history. The jinn is lurking in the shadows. The jinn, and like the cheetah doesn't belong. The cheetah probably will die. So
Yeah.
so there's this there is the possibility of the cheetah becoming a jinn as well. So so there is these two things. I mean, since you're centering, these are very trope like almost, the cheetah and the jinn. So and both are spectral. There's a spectral nature to the being and the identity of both. So uh, absolute Jaffer. So the absoluteness of Jaffer then is almost like a spectral. It's not absolute at all, right? I mean, it's not fixed. It doesn't have very sharp edges. It's more like a sort of a casual sketch. It's not entirely made with like firm lines. The identity of the the child of migrants, Jafar, is kind of shadowy, right? So yeah. So at the end of the day, the shadows, which are that of popular memory. There's history, there's myth, there's lore, there's a soundtrack of old Hindi film songs. So there's a lot of things which are spectral here, like the cheetah, like the jinn.
Yeah.
Right?
Hauntings, actually.
hauntings,
You're
yeah.
haunted by a place. You are like, and hauntings don't necessarily have to be like sort of, sad or scary. But this sort of feeling of being haunted at perhaps one of the last few things that we have in our reel based, internet based, Instagram based, that there are places where we still can manage to feel haunted. But Jafar's name itself is like because at one point of time, one character says that whatever you are going to do, the child plays cricket. Wherever he plays, somebody's going to shout and say Gaddar to him, whether he bowls well or he fields well or misfields. And Jafar is also the name of Mir Jafar.
Jafar, yeah.
And so, yeah, it's sort of the spectral or the haunting or the uncanny.
Also, the haunted by history.
Oh, yeah,
very
because
much, yeah.
the name itself,
Yeah.
Absolute Jaffer,
Yeah.
good you mentioned it. It's comes from Absolute Jaffer. And since you're a lover of cricket, you know what an Absolute Jaffer is.
Yeah.
It's an unpredictability. It's when the ball swings in a way which is kind of ghostly. Like, you're not particularly, it's a spin thing. And you don't really know where the ball is going to hit, whether it's going to go off, leg, technical.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the word which is Absolute Jaffer comes
Jaffer,
from.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Absolute Jaffer is a take. But only people like cricket nutters would know about this. And I'm not a cricket nutter. I just want to tell you that.
Okay, well, one last thing, and then I'll just open it up to. This is more comment. I don't know if Sarnath would like to speak about it, but this also is possibly Sarnath's most intimately autobiographical book in some sense, and also vulnerable. This is where Brigu is actually most vulnerable in this book. So, would you like to tell us a bit about what it felt like to write it in terms of did you feel vulnerable writing it? Did you feel kind of you're opening yourself up to scrutiny in some
Well,
sense?
somewhere one has to, like, so I don't put posts, for example, I don't have Instagram. Very rarely do I put, like, a lot of people do it all the time now. Put up like bits about themselves, which they would be it'll be like awkward, right? You don't say these things, but you put it up on Instagram, like breakups and illnesses and stuff like that. People have become quite sort of, I wouldn't say laissez-faire, but they become quite confident about like putting themselves out there. So since I don't do it, I guess I needed some kind of I'm also a person. I also have like, and rather than like sort of always couching behind like various thoughts and ideas. I mean, this is one book one has to write, which is where you have to like write it where you have
So
to
were
be
you exorcising some ghosts?
yeah, you have to
right.
be full vulnerable. If your life is just one long litany of postponed suicides, You just have to write it down. I mean, it's a form of writing a comics. I don't know about novel or stuff like that. Poetry, certainly, I know. It is also for self-preservation. It is kind of, it's yoga for your mind, I guess. I've never done yoga myself, otherwise for the body, but definitely orients your head. Definitely there's a healing process in drawing and writing for hours and hours, which is why I like that bathtub which you don't want to leave, sort of thing. So that's
Uh, Thank you, Sarnath, for for this very very riveting uh, close look at this book. And I'd like to open up the um,
question.
open up for questions, please.
Thank you, Sarnath, for that your kind words. Actually, I'm a research scholar researching in graphic medicine. So I'll be focusing on how illness is represented in graphic novels. And one of my texts, the author lived through 9/11 World Trade Center
Can
attack.
you introduce yourself?
Myself, Manu B. I'm a
Manu.
research scholar from the University of Calicut, currently pursuing my research at St. Thomas College, Thrissur. So, in one of those narratives, I speak, the author is a woman diagnosed with breast cancer, but she has also lived through the horrors of 9/11 World Trade Center attack. All these things are depicted in the novel. So when you said, I see a building, the drawing itself is autobiographical. So I would like to get some inputs from you regarding how illness and physical conditions in this regard can be represented in graphic novels, how you would represent it, and what will be your inputs in such a kind of narrative.
Thank you. Should we take a few questions?
Yeah.
Illness and diseases.
Yeah. Can we take like one or two more questions and then we'll.
Hi, my name is Dilip Menon. So, Sarnath, I wanted to ask you about that wonderful phrase that you used about the life of a migrant being one of postponed suicides. Now, it's a plangent phrase, but the interesting thing here is also that when you think about Kerala, Kerala is a state of migrants. I mean, everybody is somewhere else, and then they come back or they don't. So I just wanted you to speak a bit about what the identity of a migrant is. Is it constantly in between? Does it constantly have to be invented? When you say, I am a Bengali Brahmin, is it an empirical descriptor or a nostalgic reconstruction of an identity, where you're never very sure of who you are and whether this is something that is particular to the migrant, because we're all, in some sense, living in invented identities. We are engaging in performativities of various kinds and so on. But there's something very curious about that use of a life of postponed suicides, which suggests something that suggests a displacement, an eternal displacement, where it's a condition from which you can never recover, right? And which go back to your other ironic remark about marrying a Pakistani is like immune disorder disease, right? So all of these very, very resonant, melancholic phrases, how much of your life has to be invented in sadness? Why not invent it in joy? Yeah?
What was the last sentence?
No, why invent a life that is constantly thinking about desolation rather than joy?
While it goes there, yeah. I'll first answer the deep engagement about writing and while you're writing a comics is you use all your facilities to write a comics. It definitely that level of engagement with either yourself or your illness or whatever is something that medical comics is exploring, because it's also giving shape and imagination to the things that are happening inside you, and therefore it has been like used either as a therapy or also as a documentation. So medical comics is becoming very important, but in a sense all of these are names that are given to different genres of comics. People have been doing this kind of stuff within the genre separately without actually naming them. So, for example, I've always drawn on the streets of wherever, but now there's something called street sketchers or street drawers and all that kind of thing. And it's become a new kind of I prefer when it kind of it slowly imbues into the narrative without it needing to be sort of, classified as a separate thing altogether. But I do agree that it's a rich world and it needs to be excavated properly. Um, is there anything else you asked? I am trying to remember. If I want to write something like that, yeah, that autoimmune disease of having an Indo-Pak relationship is certainly a medical comics that I would like to write about. No, I was writing with a psychiatrist, a travelogue called Magaznama. Magas being brain, Nama is like a travelogue through the brain. If brain is a country, it's like a travel through the brain. And there we were talking about a lot of pathological conditions of the brain. But the difference between a normal brain and pathological brain is very so little that you actually end up writing a biography of the brain. But that project is currently kept is shelved, but maybe someday we'll go back to that project. So yeah, the brain is my next place I would visit. Pleasure. The principle of pleasure is something that needs to be learned, Dilip, and the ability to kind of the muscles that is required to kind of learn about pleasure is something that needs to be constantly worked on. We fail, and often we fail very sort of very dramatically. But it's a struggle to kind of. But when I've written this book, I do feel some kind of a radical joy, if I may say, of having written this landscape. Perhaps trying to deal with that. But we'll talk about this. Is a longer conversation. We have 3 minutes. We'll come to that. But I think that yeah, perhaps the talk was a little less cheerful than what the book is, but as it happens, the melancholy is yeah. We have one more question, or just like them?
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm Jagdish. I'm a radiologist. So I'm a physician who visualizes for a living and look at black and white images. And that brings me to my question of the graphic novel. So the last novel I read was Vadi Vasil, which was all black and white. But in your novel, you have a mix of black and white, you have a mix of color, you have a mix of beige. How do you choose where you want to put color, where you want to leave it black and white and leave it for the readers to put color, and where you want to impose your idea in that particular frame? How do you decide that?
So it is not it is not a cognitive decision. It's not something you like rationally decide. There's a Japanese term which is karate de oberu, which means that you don't master the form masters you. It kind of, the comics itself informs you how the comic should be written. They say that if you have a bunch of if you have the sets at the location and the atmosphere already decided, the comic actors would play by themselves. You don't have to do something. Similarly, the emotional aspects of drawing and where there should be color and where there would not be color are also going to be decided by the drawing itself. So if you want to do a kind of a foggy Delhi night or a hyper cold evening in Berlin, when the delivery worker tries to urinate on the street and his urine becomes cubes of ice, and only that morning he has heard from some German person saying that there's nothing called bad weather, it's just bad clothing. He starts suspecting that perhaps there's something wrong in that proverb. It is kind of a natural, it is almost like a natural feel to kind of create a bluish background to do that. Similarly, when I create like Delhi of the 90s, which was very dark, the only place there was some light where you could go and have a beer was outside Ames Hospital, because everything else was dark, because it was like living in a rig, in a petroleum rig. To create that, you have to create those dark atmosphere. So you use colors for emotion, and often what happens is that you don't have to decide anything. Luckily, the comic itself decides. You just have to surrender to your form. And it's by surrendering all these things come out. But a lot of people are too optimized that I want to do a 40-page comics, which is going to do about this, that. This is not how I work. I just sort of start working, and I don't know where it's going to take me. I still have that luxury to do it. But a lot of people are, especially a lot of people now want to publish very quickly. Like I get so many younger people, they want to like publish. Everybody wants to publish. And it took me like 5 or 6 years to even come to that point where I needed to publish, So this this constantly like productive mode is something we need to kind of question, I suppose. I don't know. Anyway, I think our time is out.
Yeah. And the slowing down, you've already shown us the way of slowing down with the, he's taken us on slow walks in the book and also on a slow walk in the conversation. So thank you, all of you, for being here and being a very engaging audience. And thank you, Sarnath.